true that someone else in the world might have it even worse, right? They might be starving or whatever it might be. But the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Even though the worst thing that ever happened to you might be bliss for someone else, right? For example, some of these social influencers or people who are born into trust funds, they suddenly go from their 10-bedroom mansion and they have to live in a 2-bedroom apartment, which is still an amazing apartment. But for them, it's like, I've lost my home, I've moved into this tiny 3,000 square foot apartment, and someone else is in a 400 square foot apartment going, oh my God, I would love that. But it's still the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
Mr. Harry Kalimnios, good to see you, my friend. Good to see you, my friend. How you doing?
Yeah. I'm good, Nick. Nice to see you, and also nice to see you sporting some blue blocking glasses there. I haven't got mine on just yet because it's still so bright this time.
This is my third episode in a row wearing these bad boys, and actually I'm quite excited today. I'm quite excited because
I've actually bought 2 more pairs in the last week. 2 more pairs of prescription glasses, blue blocker glasses, which I'm getting next week because I'm getting tired of bringing them to London and then to Brighton and to London and to Brighton. So I think I'm going to have a pair in each place and then a spare pair as well. So nice. I'm going overboard with the prescription glasses.
Good stuff. But listen, I'm excited because I've got an idea of what we should talk about today, which we don't pre-prep these shows, as you know. But I would like to have a chat about insights, or sight from the inside, as Michael Neal would say, when we do an exercise, particularly when running. And the reason I want to sort of segue that direction today is because there's a couple of stories that I'd like to share, but also I know that when you and I exercise at your place, that's when our creative juices were flowing. We got chatting, kind of took us out of our sort of usual flow, if you like, for talking about work or everything else. And obviously I go running every day. You exercise in a different way every day. A lot of the listeners exercise, which is going to lead on to something I wanted to talk about in a bit. And I just wanted to talk about, everyone always refers to exercise being that endorphin rush for health and body, in the sense of its, cardiovascular system and all the health benefits that comes with it. But I think there's another one that's often overlooked, and that is just the way that it can clear the mind. And when the mind is clear, new innovation, new ideas, new creativity, new insights can sometimes come to the fore. And that's something you've done a lot of conversation about. I've had a few insights this week, which has really excited me. I've heard a few insights from some of our listeners, which is why I really wanted to bring it to the fore today. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, very good. In fact, like a few of our listeners, actually, or a few of my friends who are listeners, I should say, tend to listen to our show whilst exercising. So like going for a run, actually while running specifically, I think running is an easy one to listen to a podcast because you kind of get into that flow a little bit. So yeah, we can start that way. And also ties in with probably what's my most popular YouTube video, which is, I don't know how many thousands of views it's got, but a few 100,000 views. So I'll tell you what that one is in a bit.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll leave the viewers and myself guessing. Well, I'll tell you the story that I heard. It was a listener got in touch with me to say, hey, Nick and Harry, as you know, Harry, and said, big thank you for the podcast, which is great. But the story, to paraphrase it, if you like, was along the lines of this particular listener saying they were really not enjoying their job and having a bit of a tough time. And I think they used a phrase that you said on the show, Harry, which is the grass is always green on the side you choose to water. And actually, when they were out, funny enough, they were out running when they came to this insight, and they were saying, actually, I've been really hating my job and thinking about changing jobs, changing employers, don't know what to do. It's been stressing me out. And actually, as I was running, they said they came to the realization of some of the positive things that the work does do for them. It gives them the ability to take their kids out and do that. I think he does some coaching and real quality time with the children, allows them to get back and cook, allows them to have really good family time. Of course, a lot of the things we often overlook when we're got in that state of negative bias, when we're in that state of everything is bad. And it's sometimes hard then to, open our eyes and raise our awareness to the good in what we often perceive to be a negative situation. I thought that was a really good example. And it reminded me of a book called The Inside Out Revolution by Michael Neal, where he talks in there about how he refers to both exercise and meditation in this context. But he says that stress often gets greater and greater when we're trying to deal with more and more thoughts. So the idea being that I'm at work today, I've got 3 projects to deal with. I've got to work out how I can get out of this in time to pick up my daughter. I've got dinner to think about. And suddenly it comes into our mind, we've got more and more things about it. And so it just starts to overwhelm us. And of course, we start to feel stressed. And actually, when we're either meditating, which I'm relatively new to, but you obviously practiced it for a lot longer than I have, and exercise, I think are two really good opportunities where you just slow the mind. You get a chance to concentrate on something else. You think clear, you think more clearly. Breathing is involved in both, obviously in slightly different ways, and it just reduces the number of thoughts that are going through. It almost to allow new thoughts to come in. And I was talking to my wife Lucy about when I was running yesterday, which just gave me the inspiration to talk about this today. And I actually ended up writing several notes. So when I'm running, I always run with my phone, and I always have a file which is just called running notes. And in there, over the course of the years, it's about, I mean, it's got to be 4,000 or 5,000 words long now, because I obviously do a lot of running. I run every single day. And they're just full of little sentences, little things that I've seen, little things that I think about that just bring me back into the present. And I just think it's quite handy to think about what it can do to us to meditate, because people are scared to meditate, and sometimes people are scared to start exercising because they're only ever thinking really in the sense of, it's meditation's too spiritual for me, or exercise is too tough for me to get up and run. I haven't done any exercise for ages or whatever, and it's very easy for us to find resistance. So I wondered if, from your perspective, how that lands with you.
I've got a few things on that. Yeah, I mean, a couple of things actually that I was going to mention, which is interesting enough. A lot of the time, what happens now when I do my morning rebounding, so I've got a rebounder at home, and I tend to do about 25 minutes on that every morning. I've taken to the idea of just taking a notebook with me, because as I'm rebounding on there, I tend to think of ideas or things I need to do or whatever it might be, and it kind of distracts me a little bit. So I'm kind of writing down as I go. And actually, what I was going to say, I do think it does depend on the kind of exercise you're doing, because I find that if you're doing something more, I would say, I don't want to say cardio, but like singular action exercise. By that, I mean, it could be the running, it could be the cycling, it could be the rebounding, where it's low brain intensity in terms of what you need to do, as opposed to doing an Olympic lift or that sort of stuff, or bear crawls across the floor followed by jumping jacks followed by something else. I find that when you get into a repetitive state, because it becomes like a bit of a meditative state where you're putting one foot in front of the other, you're cycling, you're rebounding, that's when the mind can switch off from the thing that it was maybe thinking about and then get into those other realms. And in fact, actually, this is what I was going to say with my most popular YouTube video. I'm not sure how many views it's got at the moment, maybe like 300,000 or something like that. But it was the 10 reasons why you should maybe rebound. And I think number 9 I put on there is better thinking and clarity. After a few minutes of rebounding, you find you're able to think a bit clearer, perhaps tackle problems that you were musing over a little bit better. Increased oxygen to the brain, coupled with the distraction from the rebounding, will help you bring a new perspective to your mind. And this is borne out in the science anyway. I remember in one of my presentations, I've got it in front of me here, I talk about a study. Stanford psychologists discovered that when people walk, they increase their creativity by 60% compared to when they sit. And walking outside gives the most novel and highest quality creative analogues. And actually, interestingly enough, I think they found that even if you're walking facing a blank wall on a treadmill, it still boosted your creativity as well. So I think there's a lot to be said with that. And part of it must come down to the mind and the body is a bit like a computer. It can only do a certain amount of stuff at a time. And so if you're overthinking and you've got, like, let's say you've got the capacity in your mind and your body to do 5 activities, right? That could be walking, thinking, problem A, thinking problem B, whatever. If you crowd out problem A, B, C with the walking or the breathing, then you've got more time to focus on problem D or whatever it might be. So I think that's partly it, if that makes sense.
I think also, even on the flip side of that, if you are someone that's fearful of running because you haven't done it for so long, you'd be so focused on just doing the running and the breathing and getting through the run that actually there almost isn't space for you to worry about all the things that you've got to worry about when you get back to your office desk or when you get home. Sometimes concentrating on running or yoga or or rebounding, whatever it is you're doing in the moment, is all the thing you can do, either because the stretch hurts or because the running hurts or because you've suddenly seen the most amazing view that takes your breath away when you're running along the coast, where I am, the Jurassic coastline. So I think sometimes there's also that aspect to it.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think I remember when I did used to run many years ago, like 20 years ago. What prompted me a lot, this was actually when I wasn't a runner, but I would go out running. It was usually, I think it was maybe during my GCSEs or A levels. So we're talking quite a long time ago, because I only really became a bit of a regular runner throughout my mid to late 20s. It would be because I was stressed, right? And I would be thinking about like studies or whatever. And I would just put on the trainers, go for a run. And where I used to live in Winchmore Hill, I'm not sure if you've been there, but obviously it's Winchmore Hill. There's quite a few hills there. So the hills are really, I mean, I love doing the hills because it really takes it out of you. You really have to kind of drive hard for that. So I think, I find that. And I definitely, you were talking about before, where you were saying overloaded with thoughts. I definitely feel like I get stressed. I get a headache when I am overloaded with thoughts of bitty things that I have to do. And a little bit of that was earlier today where I was thinking I've got half a dozen of these things to do and I hadn't written them down. Normally I write them down, and if I'm desk bound, that's fine because I can write them down and I can focus if it's things that I need to do in terms of on the computer or whatever. But if I'm constantly moving about, even though I do have a to-do list on my phone that I try and capture things, I find I'm more likely to get that kind of headache. And so the running would work for me normally. Yoga doesn't, interestingly enough. Not for me. Because if I go into a yoga class, unless it's like a proper tough class, but a lot of the classes that I've been to recently haven't done that for me. I just tend to ruminate more, or ruminate, whatever we call it, think about more the problem that I had. So yoga doesn't do it for me, but I think something like not sparring, but punching, boxing with bags, where you've got someone, you can't, that's what I really like, because you can't think. You have to just focus on getting out of the way, otherwise you get hit. If you're holding the pads, or if you're hitting someone with the pads and they're kind of hitting you back. So I think it really depends on the exercise for me, whether that works, that plays in.
That makes sense. I can't think I'd be imagining what I'm going to make for dinner while someone's throwing punches at me, so I can understand why that might clear.
No, occasionally your mind might slip and you do get hit. That's happened to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can see where, even in football matches where goalkeepers lose concentration, as they say a lot, and then something goes in. I think it was, we were talking about Einstein off air, but I've written it down on my notes here. The problems cannot be solved with the same mindset that created them, which was Einstein. And when you change your situation, when you change your environment, when you change your position, everything about you, your mindset shifts. And just from going outside from my office environment here to going outdoors with my running shoes on, my running shoes makes me feel different as soon as I put them on. I almost change how I feel about who I am and where I am. And you go out and head out into what today has been a beautiful sunshine day. I think it can often change your mindset from a positive perspective as well, which I think is really, really nice. I was thinking, I've just turned my I managed to lean on my chair and it's dropped me down 3 inches.
I know you've gone dark all of a sudden as well. That might be why, because the light is so
Let's put that back up.
prescript.
Don't lean on that bit. I'll get the light back in. That's all right. But I was listening to earlier, I'm a big fan of Sydney Banks, and it was reminding me after I heard the listener, I thought, that will remind me to go back to some of the Sydney Banks notes. And he always says, only one thought away from happiness and one thought away from sadness. Like whatever, you're always feeling your last, you're feeling to live in the shadow of a thought. So what were you thinking before? And that got me thinking as well when I was running today. I ran down a beautiful train track, what old train tracks it used to be, which goes from Exmouth to Budley Salterton. And the thing I was thinking about there, and I was thinking about the person that wrote in, is often our view can change depending on how we are feeling in the moment. So Michael Neal talks about a glass elevator. We can go up or down a level at any moment. We have the capacity, our human mind has the capacity to change level. Sometimes when we can't see the wood for the trees, we're very, very low on the elevator. Everything is dark. We're not really appreciating our surroundings. You can have the most beautiful sunset, but you wouldn't notice it because you're down. And sometimes you can go up a few levels in that glass elevator. And when you go up a few levels, your perspective completely changes. You suddenly notice things you didn't see before. You may not be at the top, you may not be in the mode of enlightenment, but actually, if you allow yourself to go up just a few levels in the elevator and just change your perspective, when your perspective changes, your view on life changes, your view on a problem can change, your view on something you thought was really bad, like not enjoying your job, suddenly go, actually, there's loads this job does give me that I've never really appreciated before because I've never had the opportunity to. I've always been focused on what I don't have rather than what I already do. And that links, I think, to a lot of problems in relation to well-being and wellness, which is, and we've talked about this before, is we live in absolute abundance. We're born in abundance. As you talked about babies, when we're born in, they don't come with the stresses. They want for very few things. And yet we sometimes forget just how much abundance is around us. We're always striving for the next thing. When I get that, then I'll be happier. When I do this, then I'll be happier. When I achieve that thing, I'll feel better. And then we get there and we want the next thing up. And actually, there'll be loads of people in the world that will look at our situation and go, oh, well, when I get to that position, the position we're already in, I'll be happier. And there'll be people behind that, and it keeps going back. And that's where the comparison been.
Well, I mean, like I say, it's all relative, right? We live in a relativistic universe, so you're always comparing yourself relative to someone else. But something I heard a while back, which did resonate with me, where on the converse, right, where you're talking about all the abundance and things we do have, where people, they might say they might be in a bad state, right, because some things happen, right? The job they had, they lost it. The partner they had, they lost, or whatever. And it's true that someone else in the world might have it even worse, right? They might be starving or whatever it might be. But the guy that I listened to, I can't remember who it was, but it said, maybe it was even on Joe Rogan, but they said the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And what I think they meant by that is that even though the worst thing that ever happened to you might be, bliss for someone else, right? For example, some of these social influencers or people who are born into trust funds, they suddenly go from their 10-bedroom mansion and they have to live in a 2-bedroom apartment, which is still an amazing apartment. But for them, it's like, I've lost my home. I've moved into this tiny 3,000 square foot apartment, and someone else in a 400 square foot apartment going, oh my God, I would love that. But it's still the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And so it's really interesting, like trying to compare our darkest days and our best days with other people, because it's all relative to our own scale. But I did want to touch upon, because you did mention Einstein, and I know we mentioned it off air, and I didn't tell you why I was mentioning him. But one of the things, I think it's him, or it might just be one of these urban legends. It might have been Thomas Edison, someone like that. But in order to create solutions to problems, where you were talking about, you said one of my favorite quotes from him, which is, you can't solve a problem on the same level that created it. A lot of our creation of our problems happens on our conscious level. It happens on our beta wave level of our brain. And so he would actually sit in his chair, and I think it was either hold spoons or hold balls or something like that in his hand. And then he would start to drift off to sleep. And then as he slept or was about to fall asleep, that's when the solutions would come to his head. But normally what would happen is you'd sleep, you'd dream, and you may or may not remember it when you wake up. Whereas because he released his hand and the spoons or the balls fell, it would wake him up. And so he would have that in his memory straight away to come to that solution that he wanted. And this is really all about manipulating the different brain waves that we have, because I think this ties back to where you exercise. So I'm not sure how familiar, I'm not massively familiar with the different brain waves, but we have different wavelengths that our brain operates at, right? Beta, which is where we are most of the day. It's a busy, active mind. I think that's at around 12 to 35 hertz. Alpha, which is around 8 to 12 hertz, where you're very relaxed, passive attention. Theta, 4 to 8 hertz, deeply relaxed, inward focus. So that's going into your more meditation, hypnosis state. And then you've got delta as well, which is sleep, 0.5 to 4 hertz. But then you've also got gamma, which is high concentration problem solving at about 35 hertz and above. And I think manipulating these different brain waves, because we often come to a lot of things in a beta state of mind. And when you go into, I think it's young children up to the age of 7, they're mostly in a kind of alpha theta state, even when they're waking, which is why they're able to learn so quickly and so effortlessly, because they're effectively in a state of hypnosis for the first 7 years of their life, because it's the same brainwave pattern that they have that we would get when we go under hypnosis. And so by running and rebounding or any of those actions, it allows our brain to go into a different wavelength. And therefore, that's why we've come up with those solutions, or that's why we release the so-called problems that we're finding in the day that we've got. I think it's really interesting, the whole manipulating brainwaves so you get to the state that you need to be in.
No,
So
I think you made.
I mean, I don't know if you've had the experience. I'm sure our listeners might have done, where you've had a problem and literally we hear it, right? Oh, sleep on it, right? Sleep on it. You'll find the solution the next day, and it's true. You do, because you get out of the way of the conscious mind, which is thinking of all the ways it can't be solved, and the unconscious mind goes to work and creates a different solution that you wouldn't normally get.
Yeah, I think it's not. It's
really,
also,
really powerful.
in addition to that, though, it's also the fact that, going back to the Einstein quote, in the morning you may have a different mindset, maybe partly because of the sleep, but also a new day brings a new dawn, right? And you can sometimes you just wake up with a different mindset to the way you went to bed. You can feel different. So sleeping on an email, yes, for example, that you're, a stressful email that you may or may not send, the chances are you will make an edit the following day. Partly of that might be due to the alpha beta ways to sleep, but also sometimes a new morning can just change the way we feel. One of my favorite quotes is your day does not dictate your mood dictates your day. And I think if you bear that in mind in terms of how you approach things, it's never the day that's the problem. It's the thoughts we're having about that day that's causing it for us. Our thoughts sometimes can mess with our thinking in itself.
Yeah.
And that's one of the same.
Well, this is why I think it's so important. And I know we're not necessarily covering routines today, but this is kind of one of those light bulb moments for me, probably 12, 15 years ago. Again, going back to that, your mood dictates your day. It's like, okay, if my mood dictates my day, how is it that I can start the day in a good mood? And a lot of the time I thought, oh, it's just random, right? You wake up on the wrong side of the bed, you wake up on the right side of the bed. The reality is it's not that. It's the things that you put in place in those first few minutes, first half an hour of the day that will dictate your day for you. And so when I realized that, and I started putting in place the different things that go into my somewhat convoluted routine now, but generally it can be very short, I realized that actually I'm going to be much better off. And even now, I notice that. For example, sometimes if I'm getting up a bit late, I may try and truncate things, and I might grab my phone earlier than I would normally grab it. And I notice that the rest of my day doesn't go nearly as well as when I maybe leave it that extra hour.
Tell you what, rather than
give
me your, because you've, as you said, you've got quite a truncated way now, and let's make this accessible for the listeners. What would be your 3 top things that you would do then to start your day well? For listeners might, maybe they are coming out of bed, they are feeling groggy, they're not feeling top of the world. What are the 3 things or 5 things that you go, actually, Nick, these are things I would, start small that they can do to make them feel better? And I'll share some of mine after.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might have even covered it on a previous session, but the first thing I would say is avoid that phone, right? Avoid that phone. And I sometimes use my phone for meditation, but it would be in airplane mode. Or actually, when I'm in London, I have a separate little MP3 device that I bought for 15 quid that I have all my meditations on, because I just don't want to have the temptation. So the first thing I would say, and I think the phrase I was using today with people is one I use, is 9 for 90. So 9 is no in German. So 9 for 90. That means 90 minutes after waking up, try and give it at least 90 minutes before you reach for your phone and anything like that, if possible, which I think it is for some people. A lot of people will push back on me and say it's not possible. But that would be the first thing I would say, like, have that morning for you, right? Because the only 2 times of the day we have real control is when we wake up and when we go to sleep, and the activities we do around that. The other thing, definitely water. Okay, definitely lots and lots of water and movement. And then probably I would say that breathing. So I normally say BMW, right, which is B for breathing, M for movement, and W for water. And breathing could be, like I say, some breaths in the shower. It could be some meditation. It could be some Wim Hof. And I find that when I do that, now that could be truncated. So the breaths could take 10 seconds. The movement could take a minute. The water could take 30 seconds. So it only has to take 2 or 3 minutes. Or I could do 15 minutes on the breathing and doing my 15 minutes there. I could do half an hour or so on the movement, which is typically what I would like to do. And then, water would still be, a minute or so. That's basically my routine. I also probably would avoid, I guess this is still the 9 for 90, things like the radio or anything like that. If I'm going to listen to anything in the morning, I typically find that I'm better off listening to something like classical music when I'm chopping my vegetables for my juices. But that would be it. Breathe, move, water, and avoid technology. I think those 4 things, even if you just avoided the technology for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, an hour and a half if you can, I think that makes a big difference to how you set up. Because otherwise, you're going to be looking at the news, you're going to be looking at the feed, you're going to compare yourself to your friend, you're going to suddenly realize all the things you've got to do, and your day runs away with you. So that would be my key thing.
One aren't too dissimilar.
What about you?
To be fair, I think I will definitely reach my phone earlier than 90 minutes, but actually I don't reach for it first thing in the morning now. I have made a few shifts in what I do, and I think that's because you do see an email that you don't want to have to handle, and it for me, it throws me out of my flow in the morning. So I've set myself up with a few things that are, it won't be for everyone, right? But the things that I get a lot of enjoyment out of in the morning. And my light's gone down. Anyway, first thing of that is when I wake up, I get straight out, I go downstairs on my own and I'll make myself a coffee. Right, I've got a nice coffee maker, I'll make that, but I won't drink it at the breakfast bar and that. I go outside, we've got like a summer room, and I'll make sure, again, no phone, no TV, anything like that. I'm just facing with my little Coco dog, which I think is by my feet, a little dash, and she'll come down with me. And I'll just have a coffee, and if I have any breakfast, I'll have the same thing. Looking out, and we've got a giant tree at the bottom of a cedar tree, it's like 400 years old. Thing's massive. Like it would take 5 people to put their arms around it to get around to. Got a really beautiful view. You get the squirrels out, you get the dew, you get all the different things. I've learned I guess it's not a meditation in the sense that I'm eyes closed and thinking, oh, it's musical or anything like that, or any kind of guided thing. But for me, it's just a moment of silence. The time it takes to drink a coffee, we're talking 10 minutes. It's 10 minutes before I get into my exercise, before I do anything else. And actually, the first thing I do when I finish that, because that for me starts the day well. Usually, you've got the sun coming up. You've got all the nature outside. I'm not out with nature, although if it's sunny, I will go outside as well because of English weather. It's not always able to. So typically, I'll either be inside. If it's not, I will sit outside. We've got an outside chair and table as well, concrete table. So I'll go and sit on that if it's sunny weather. I'll come in, and funny enough, then I do the same as you, water. Although I always dilute mine with Ribena. I know you'll go against that, but it's hydration. I'll have a pint, right? I know you're laughing at me now for those watching. I don't like water, listeners. For those, I really struggle to drink water, but I can drink flavored water. So I have a pint of water straight after. And then I get into my exercise. And again, I haven't looked at my emails at this point. I know if I start looking at emails, it'll detract from the run I have to do, or the cycle I have to do, or the exercise I have to do. And I know I'll then be annoyed later that I haven't managed to do the workout I planned because I've been distracted. So I'll then go out and do my exercise. Sometimes that's inside, watt bike, or outdoors for run, whatever. So for me, it's something I really enjoy doing, which I know is caffeine and it's not for everyone, but I'll have a coffee in front of nature, followed by a pint of Ribena, water. Let's use the water for that for you. Followed by exercise. Then I'm ready to start my day. But there's 2 other things I'll add in, which I found really helpful. One is remembering to give affection. Now, not everyone's the same, but it's really easy to get into a habit where we don't remember to do the things that we love to do. And one is, and if they're not there anymore, you'll miss it forever, right? So when I see my wife, I'll try and make sure I have a moment to give her a kiss and a cuddle, whatever. I'll make sure with my little Dachshund that I have a few minutes just to play with her, give her a cuddle in the morning. She's been waiting all night, And actually, I find just giving affection and receiving affection first thing in the morning just sets you on the right path. It's feeling that love or that connection. And if Lucy or anyone's away, I might phone my mum, or I might go and see the kids, or whatever it is. But I'll try and make and orchestrate somewhere to get some affection in them first thing in the morning. First thing, if everyone else is asleep, would be with the Dachshund. Otherwise, it might be with Lucy for waking up together. But I think that's really important. And then, there's a book about this, but a bit later on, when I get back from the workout, usually everyone's up and the kids have already gone to school or whatever. But usually I will come back in and make the bed. So I make the bed every single day in our house, or I try to. Lucy may challenge me on that. Most of the time I do it. But again, it's setting your day up the right way. So make your bed, start your day disciplined, tidy, get it done, and then I can come down and start.
I make sure I make the bed every day. I tend to do it after I've had a shower, so I have the kind of duvet or whatever it is, the weighted blanket really, hanging on the door and let the bed air. And actually, I have a lot of weird rituals around the number 20. So like when I do my morning movement, I don't exercise like you do first thing in the morning. I find that would be too stressful for my body, especially, it needs to warm up a little bit. So my exercise that I've been saying to these listeners is the rebounding and the mobility work. But the mobility work is a 5-minute thing that I do. And I do like 20 squats, 20 Spider-Man lunges, 20, 20, 20, everything's 20. And when I shower, I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but I have like this air drying process that I go through before I even put a towel on, which is 20 swipes with my hand down one arm, 20 swipes on the other arm, 20 on the body, 20 on the legs. And I do all these 2020s. I can't remember what the actual example I wanted to give you was though, because I can't remember what did you say a second ago?
About what?
I can't remember what why I even started talking about 20, because it was 20 something that I was doing. It wasn't the exercise. Anyway, that's escaped me now. But what I wanted to say as well, when you have that coffee, this is the thing I find really funny. Like when I watch a movie or I watch, especially in America, any American movies, and you see people, the character waking up first thing in the morning and someone hands them a coffee straight away and I'm like, I just think that's the worst thing in the world to do. And the reason I would say, and I said this today in my talk, if you are a coffee drinker, and I'm not saying anything against drinking caffeine or coffee, but wait. Again, 9 for 90, wait for 90 minutes or a couple of hours, because you're losing the actual massive effects you would get from the coffee, because you've already got that cortisol rise in the morning, and by having the coffee, you're not gaining anything. You're better off waiting a couple of hours.
Caffeine. I think I've drank way too much coffee for one cup of coffee to have any impact on me whatsoever.
You're drinking it as more of a ritual, right?
It's the enjoyment of the drink, of sitting down with a hot drink in front of it wouldn't be the same. It's not for the effects of the caffeine. I probably need about 6 cups of coffee to even feel it these days. I drink so much coffee anyway, but I don't think that's the reason. So I know, well, that's a separate conversation, but the point is,
that's another conversation about caffeine, which, is an interesting one, because no one likes having coffee bash, because it's probably the most used drug in the world. And it can have its benefits, right? I'm not here to bash caffeine. I sometimes have it myself. But I would definitely suggest the water first thing. I actually have a hot water, to be fair. I don't know if you would like hot water. My mum prefers hot water now.
I'll have a hot Ribena though, most days in the evening. That's after 2 o'clock.
But Ribena, isn't Ribena sugar? Is Ribena not sugar?
Yeah, we have the low sugar stuff, but yeah, it's. I mean, I can't make any claims that it's healthy, but it makes it drinkable. Without it, I wouldn't drink anything. So that's
Fair enough. But what I would say is you don't need to, or listeners don't necessarily need to exercise first thing in the morning, but I would say move, stretch, mobility. Because you've got basically cobwebs from your night's sleep. That's the main thing. A lot of the time, actually, there are different times of the day where it's better to exercise. Cardio tends to be a bit better, I guess, earlier in the morning. Like you tend to be strongest around 2, 3 in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon. So there are different times that if you had an ideal day, you could exercise. But generally speaking, you're going to exercise when you can. And a lot of people, myself included, if I do exercise in the morning, it's generally better because life otherwise gets in the way. But I've noticed that I like to warm up a little bit. So that's why I have that half an hour warm up, and then maybe I might do some exercise, or maybe I might do it a couple of hours later. So I wouldn't do my 90-minute watt bike or whatever it is you do first thing. I'd find that's just too taxing for my body. Probably. So
we're all different. I do know that's when I get my thoughts in. So I'll share one of my ideas. This might be a terrible idea, right? But I think by the time this comes out, I'll be safe to air it. So my daughter's going to do some conservation work in Costa Rica next year, and it's really good. She's young. She's put herself out there. She goes away for 4 weeks, and she's looking after turtles, building a school. We're trying to raise money for her fundraising to get out there. It's about 5,000 quid she's got to raise. And I was running to literally, again, I wrote it down in my notes. I'm looking at it in front of me now, the little things I make up. So these are some of the random notes. I'll stop running, right? And I'll go back to the second one because they're completely unrelated and unconnected in the way they come through. But the first one was this, talking about my daughter. So what can we do to raise money? And also it's my wife's birthday coming up. So I'll tell you what we can do is why don't we make a recipe book? She's coming down to stay with me for work experience next week. And we've got an opportunity to make some beautiful food. And I think if we make some 10 to 15 recipes, she's really into salads and healthy eating, all those kind of things, right? Make it really colorful. For her, it gives her an aspect of she can learn to create a design. She can do the photography piece, which will be relevant for work experience with me anyway. Get some nice pictures. You can create something completely unique that's from her. It can be a great gift for my wife for her birthday from my daughter that's completely individual and important to her. And then if it goes well, the business head of me is, well, we can start selling them to other family friend members to raise money for her charitable cause. So I stopped and wrote that down, and I haven't told her yet. That's going to be the idea that I'm going to, when I see it, hopefully she's up for it. But I think that's a really, don't know where that came from, by the way. I was just running and it just popped in. I went, oh, stop, write it down or forget it. It's like in the middle of the night, we think we'll remember these things, we won't. This is why there's no connection. The next thing, these are all notes from today, right? I've got them timestamped here on my notes. Later on, I was wondering, I don't know where this came from because that's the way the thoughts work, right? We never know what's going to come in, and sometimes we pay attention to our thoughts, and sometimes we don't, and we forget what they were, right? Well, I wrote this one down. I just wrote down, making $1 million or recovering from heroin addiction. Is a parent more proud of one or the other? I think they'd be proud of both. I don't know where that came in, right? I'm just thinking about, obviously in my head, I'm thinking about coaching. I'm thinking about what success metric is, and parental approval often has a really big part to play in the actions that people take. But I don't know what, I've just written it down because for me, I just wanted to come back and think about it again and revisit it. And we don't need to answer the question while I'm here, but it's just an example of where we are. And then I wrote down a quote, which was something that isn't mine. I put it in quotation marks, and I couldn't. It's a French philosopher, something I was listening to in one of my audios today, and I couldn't get the name, but I got the quote down. And it says, "We're not human beings having a spiritualist experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience." I just thought that was quite nice, so I just wrote that down. I thought I may well revert back.
I've heard that from I heard that from Wayne Dyer, so I don't know whether he originally said it or not, but Wayne Dyer is often quoted as saying that. But actually, there's a few things I noted down. And also, by the way, I've remembered what the 20 thing that I was going to talk about originally when I started talking about the 20. And the reason was we were talking about making the bed. And so one of the things I do before I make the bed is I hang up the duvet or hang up the weighted blanket on the door, have the shower and stuff. But I like to have the bed kind of, I guess, aired a little bit. And I remember I have this weird thing, which I didn't really realize. I don't know when I got it into my head to do it, but I started doing it a few years ago. I take both pillows and then I just count to 20 whilst hitting down on the bed. And what I've noticed is when I've had friends stay, like my mate Trevor was staying a couple of years ago it was, and he was like, what's all this thumping noise that I'm hearing in the morning? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's because I'm like going, and in my head I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I just do that 20 times. But also on your recipe book, many years ago, I started writing down recipes. I had this little notebook in the kitchen and I would make up food and I would just write it down. And a lot of the times I just made it once and wrote it down with the intention of doing a recipe book, which are really, really tough because of the photos and the way it's formatted and everything else. And mine, again, wasn't to sell loads, but actually it was mainly to give or to friends, because I've got, and we'll talk about diet in a future episode, but because I've got my particular ways of eating, I tend to either not to get invited too much for dinner, or people get into a panic inviting me over for dinner and they're like, what can we cook Harry and stuff? So I thought, you know what, if I just did a recipe book with 20, 30 recipes or some, breakfast or lunch or dinners in there that people can actually follow nice and simple, so that I don't need to then not get invited.
The recipe book would be amazing, but it would also, if you sent that to me, it would make you look really high maintenance. Hey guys, I'm coming around. Here's a recipe book. You can make
it would, but I wouldn't send it the week. I wouldn't send it the week before I was coming round. I'd give it to people for Christmas, and then hopefully in the years to come, I'd get invited round. The other thing I wanted to say, when you're talking about all these notes coming to you, all these ideas coming to you, there is a lot of people get ideas in the shower, right? And again, that is partly because our conscious mind is out of the way. We might be singing, we might be where it's more tactile because we're feeling things touching on our skin. The water also is a great device or tool for thinking. And so actually having like a notepad in the shower or some sort of waterproof notepad, which I think is a thing, and people do sell them now, is a good thing. And then the other thing, you were talking about success, and I was watching this really annoying YouTube panel where there was like an alpha male, and he was saying how if you're not successful in everything, then you're not really successful. Where you've got to have a great body, and you've got to have $1 million a year income, and you've got to have this, that, and the other. And whereas there was other guys on the panel who were saying, no, my success is I'm there for my family, I'm providing my family, and so on. And I just wanted to share the quote that I really like, and partly because I saw about 5 minutes of Darkest Hour, that Winston Churchill movie, the other day, and I've seen it before. But Winston Churchill's quote, I think it is, where he says, "Success is going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm."
Yeah,
I like that quote. We all have our own definitions of success, I think, but I do like that one as an idea.
But for people that are listening, we've obviously given a few things that we do, and everyone's individual. And you and I are slightly different in the way that we do things in the morning. But if you do want to make a change, nothing changes until you change yourself. Right? You've got to. It won't just happen. I know you've got the secret, the laws of attraction, where people believe that these things will happen if they think about it and want something enough. But as you and I both know, the word in laws of attraction is action. And I think if people are listening and they want to make a change, you've got to do something. You've got to change your life in one way or another to understand and to experience how it can change your life as well. I think going back to what you were just talking about then with what success means, our level of awareness in any given moment. So when you're out running, my awareness is probably heightened because I'm looking at what's around me. I'm looking at nature. I've got less thoughts clogging up my mind. I've got a 360 perspective almost because you're not just fixed on a screen. Changes the way that we look at things. It changes our human experience. I think sometimes we get so, and myself included, we get so narrow focused because we are just looking at a computer screen. I know the screens can change and the emails can change, but it impacts our awareness. So we can often become unaware of the things that are amazing in our lives in any given time. I could be unaware of the great fun that my kids could be having outside the door because I'm just fixed on this email in this moment, thinking I've got to get it done. Or, become unaware of the birds, and it can get a bit spiritual or cliche, whatever, but the bird song outside, the sunshine. I mean, these are just things that just instantly make us feel better. But I think you've got to raise your level of awareness to really feel the human experience at its fullest. And I think exercise and meditation are two enablers to at least increase the level a little, turn the dial up a little, just to feel a little bit better.
I mean, I think as an exercise, and this is relevant, even though it might not sound relevant, is for our listeners to actually start to open up their peripheral vision a little bit more. And what I mean by that is literally we're so used to having a focus now, especially the last 100 years, but certainly the last 20 years, where we're focused on screens so much that we've almost become like those horses that have got those eye things on them, so they're focused just on in front. And this is actually quite a useful exercise where you take your index finger behind your ear, and then you start to kind of move it gradually forward, and then you want to see where you can notice it. And some people, they'll only notice it when it's quite far in front of their head. Others will notice it when it's almost around the back of their head. And although this sounds, how is this relevant to every day? It is, because when we open up our visual cortex, we're opening up our brain is basically an extension of the eye, as I heard the other day. We're opening up our mind awareness as well. And so we're not so narrow focus. I mean, it's good to be narrow now and then. This is where you get into your gammas and your alpha, beta ways of thinking. But if you want to get into the deltas and the thetas, you want to open up your awareness. You want to be able to bring everything in. So just opening up your peripheral vision. I remember it was an exercise I think I did in my NLP training 12, 15 years ago. So I think that would be an exercise for the audience to just start to open up their peripheral vision, literally, by doing exercises like that.
Another bit of advice,
and I think this plays into what you were talking about with running, because when you run, yes, you can be focused on the step in front of you, but also you do have to have your peripheral vision for, cyclists, for pedestrians, for birds flying across your path, whatever it might be. So that's why I think that helps.
It just makes
meditation
it
is
more
slightly
enjoyable as
different.
well. I mean, otherwise you might as well run on a treadmill in a windowless room. You want to go outside because that's what makes it enjoyable, right? Seeing nature, being outside. I think the other thing, I had a podcast on my HR channel with a guy called Jeff Harry, who's a play expert. And he did this on me live on the show. I'll do it with you, but I think it's something, again, in terms of raising our level of awareness, because it does help determine our human experience. And he did it for me, and we had a bit of a giggle and made me feel positive. So he said, I'll do the exercise he did to me. It was actually earlier today. So Harry, remind me of a toy that you loved as a child.
Toy that I loved as a child. I did get this radio controlled car for my 11th birthday, I think it was, that I really enjoyed, because I really wanted one for years and years. And I was always getting one of those radio controlled cars that had the wire attached to the car, so you had to follow the car around. And this was the first one I got where it didn't have that. It was actually radio controlled, not remote controlled. So that was quite fun.
Okay, that's great. And tell me something you loved doing when you were a child.
What did I love doing when I was a child? I loved playing sports.
Anything specific?
Football.
Football. Okay, tell me a little bit more. So tell me 3 things that you loved.
3 things I loved, or 3 things I loved about the football?
About the football. About the thing you chose.
3 things I loved about the football. One was the feeling of just being outside, moving, whatever it might be. The other one was scoring a goal.
Yeah,
I really loved. And what was the other thing that I liked about football? I guess being part of a team.
Okay. And what are the 3 things you loved about your remote control car?
I think the first thing was I loved about it is because I feel like there was 2 things really. It was one, it was actually a present that I wanted, and often my parents didn't get me the present that I wanted because parents don't know the toys so much. So I was like, oh, great. Secondly, I think it was because I got into the secondary school that was kind of tough to get into, and so I had a good Christmas that year. I remember it. And third, I think it was just fun, to kind of drive the car.
So this is what he did with me, is right, and he gave great responses. But it's sometimes about raising our level of awareness, and for me, this takes us back to what our core is, what our core values are. So for you, if you're going about football, the first thing you did was health. You like feeling good, you like feeling healthy, scoring a goal, you like potentially being noticed. There's a bit of an ego in there, maybe a little bit, like to please others, maybe by scoring and being on the winning team. And then you put teamwork. You like working with other people. And what was interesting there is there are probably 3 core values that are still with you today that we often forget. The things we used to love as children. There's loads of movies like this. Look at Big being a great one with Tom Hanks, right? He forgot who he was. He starts working in a toy store and then starts realizing all the things that he really was. Then you think about the toy. Well, the toy actually showed your parents actually really listened to you because it's something you really wanted. You clearly had previous gifts that you didn't, but that one they nailed on and you felt amazing. Then you're able to the rewards of that with your secondary school, that achievement, the way that you'd worked hard to get somewhere. I think all those things we sometimes forget what make us who we are and the values that we have. What was most interesting for me, and those won't necessarily hear this if they're on audio only, is when you talked about both, you instantly smiled. You instantly felt better. You remote control, you almost started laughing. I didn't even know where you were going to go with it when you said, oh, remote control car, and a big grin came across your face. But again, it's a different awareness. I think sometimes we can get so fixated on where we are here and now, and everyone says, we've got to be in the present, we've got to be in the present, we've got to be in the present. But we sometimes forget what got us here. And actually the things that make us playful, the things that we have fun with, can just change our entire way of thinking about something. And if you came out of a stressful situation and someone asked you that question and you're able to take yourself there authentically and then go back to that problem, you may have a slightly different mindset to it as well, because you'd be more in tune with what's your core value in that moment, which might be collaboration, teamwork, fun. You use the word fun. You know, good fun to be around, achievement, health. I just think sometimes we can lose sight of that. But you've said so many times, babies and children don't, you know, feel different. They don't have all the worries of the world we put upon us. And sometimes it's nice just to go back there. And it might be a nice exercise for people to do at home, just to ask their wives, their you know, their parents or whatever, what are things you love? And it'll give them a bit of an indication of who they were as a child as well. And we often forget, we lose that playfulness.
No, absolutely. I think that's that's the thing we do as society. I kind of notice it sometimes with my nieces. There's an age somewhere between 7 and 10 where things start to shift a little bit from them wanting to grow up and become whatever it is, a princess or an astronaut or whatever, to suddenly going, oh, I'm not really sure, or I don't really know, or. And I'm not saying that you have to know at that age, but like the point is there, it's everything is a possibility, right? There is, you know, there is no concept in their mind that they can't become a princess, even though there are certain rules around becoming a prince or a princess or whatever, or you have to marry the right person. But there's no limitations, I would say. And then we learn limitations, I guess. I mean, obviously as a baby there are limitations, but you don't realize those because everything is accessible to you.
And we discovered judgment as well. And I'll never forget the day my daughter, who would very happily, you know, put on shows and do dances and sing songs, and almost overnight, suddenly it wasn't cool anymore at school because you're going to get made fun of, and you just stop. You just completely stop. I think suddenly now other people.
Well, we find that judgment even more now, right, on a global scale, because suddenly you're 13 years old and you're on social media or whatever, and you're being judged by anyone and everyone on everything. And I've noticed that, like, even my nieces, they don't take photos in the way that we took photos at 8 years old or 7 years old. They're not smiling in the same way. They're not smiling so much. They've learned to do the Instagram pout and the Instagram. And I'm like, loosen up. If you're growing up in this kind of way, I don't know. I mean, we could go on about technology because I just listened to a 2-hour podcast.
Feeling good enough.
Well, I listened to a 2-hour podcast recently on technology and how it's impacting young children, and it's just reinforced everything I've already been talking about. I did send it to my nieces. I'll send it to you if you want, but it's a bit dry if you're not really into that sort of stuff. But I don't know. I honestly can't wait for the day when they start banning smartphones for young teenagers and wait till you're 16 or something like that. Even though a lot of people listening might think I'm a bit of a Luddite for saying so, but I can see it only going in a negative way if we allow this to happen to younger and younger.
I think it's a good example of where kids have it right, because feeling good enough about ourselves isn't something you do, isn't something you get, isn't something you become. It's something you just realize. And I think that, in my opinion, and I think if you're a child, when you want to be that princess, you are that princess. You just realize you are whatever you want to be in that moment. And it's not for anyone else to tell you otherwise. And you can try and tell them, and they'll be convinced that they are that princess in that world that they're in. And we lose sight of it. And we suddenly feel like we need to become something in order to be that thing. We have to be good enough to do that thing. We have to achieve that or get that thing to do, you know, to do or whatever. And it's all bullshit ultimately.
Yeah, it's just societal rules that we
put. To realize it and get that awareness to look at who we are, what we stand for, and what are our values, and what do we give back to the world. No one's better than anybody else. We are who we are. We have so much abundance in this world. It's crazy. The sun's going to come up tomorrow. You know, and you try to describe what the sun looks like, or just try to describe your favorite food to someone who's never tried it. It's almost impossible. Someone said to me once, Nick, describe orange juice to someone who's never tasted orange juice. Like, it's impossible. You can't, because it's...
I mean, I tell you a thought I had the other day, and it's because in the news, the astronaut from the Apollo 8 mission recently died. He was 90-something years old. I think he died in a plane crash. He was still a pilot at 90 years old, but he is most famous for... He was on the Apollo 8 moon mission, which was the first Apollo mission to go to the moon and circumvent it. But he's the one that took the Earthrise photo. You know that famous photo where they're taking a picture of the Earth and it's half in a shadow and
Yeah.
half not. And I was looking at that photo and just contemplating on it for a bit. And I was thinking how wonderful and spiritual it must have been to see that, because I know about gravity, right? I know why the planets circle the sun and all that. But I was still thinking, isn't it just a miracle that there's this fragile blob in space that is somehow staying there, right? It's not falling, although falling is a concept of gravity, and it wouldn't make sense to fall in that context. But I know all of that, but I'm still looking at that going, isn't that an effing miracle? And I think this is where we're talking about having wonder in the smallest things. That is a big thing, but I don't know. The universe is just amazing when you
There are
look at it.
miracles all around us. That's the beauty of it. We just don't open our eyes to see it. I think we're going back to running, or whatever it is you decide to do, whether it's meditation or yoga or rebounding. Sometimes I just think it allows us to open our eyes and see the wonder in the world and the miracles in the world a little bit more often than perhaps we would if we just got up, checked our phone, went straight to work, got on our commute, came back, ate dinner, watched TV, went to bed. And yeah, I've probably just described the lives of 90% of the Western world, and how they live it. And it's a shame.
I'll tell you something I posted as a repost the other day on Instagram. Don't know if you saw it, but it was a bit of a cartoon slideshow of children from the 70s to the 2020s in the park, and just seeing the difference of how it progressively got to the point of like starting to look at the screens when we had phones, and then it was the smartphone where everyone's glued to the screen, and it was just really sad. And we don't open our eyes. This is why I was talking about peripheral vision, because a lot of the time we're so focused on the screen, or we're so focused on the thing in front, that we don't actually look. I remember a few years ago I went into town and I cycled there, as I often do, and it must have been winter because I was wearing gloves. And I remember halfway through shopping that I'd just left my gloves just on the bike, on the seat of the bike. And this is central London. I'm like, yeah, someone's going to steal them, or someone's going to take them, or something like that. Why anyone wants gloves, who knows? But they were totally fine an hour later when I got back. And I was thinking, I think it's because a lot of people aren't paying attention anyway. Maybe a lot of people are honest, which is also a good thing. But people don't really pay attention so much. They are in their own little space to the point where they're not seeing what's around them. So if they walked past a £10 note on the floor, they wouldn't see it. I think we talked about that Darren Brown episode on luck. And people who thought they weren't lucky just didn't see that £10 note on the floor. And this is what I was saying about the exercise, about open up your peripheral vision, because it does open up the world. It opens up the world in a different way. And the other day, I think I was in a cafe, and the first instinct is to just take out the phone and watch a YouTube video or listen to the podcast. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to sit. I'm just going to observe, right? Remember when we used to observe people? This is what we used to do a big amount of in Greece. In Greece, Saturday nights, you'd go out to the cafes, and all the cafe chairs would be like pointing onto the street. Yeah, pointing onto the street, and it would be a literal catwalk, as people would just go volta. Volta means a walk, so volta, and people would just go walk up and down, almost like it's a fashion show. And then other people would be just sipping on their drinks for a couple of hours, looking at that fashion show. Now, I guess the same scene that I'd see is everyone would be on their phones. Which would be terrible.
And then we talked about it on the show before. I can't remember who it was, but I saw a show on Netflix where the guy, put a test out there and said, "Look, next time you go to a restaurant with your partner, and you need to go, and the other one goes to the loo, just two things. One is see how long it takes you to get your own phone out. But second, we get a chance to be distracted, we take it. And if you have the awareness not to do that, just have a look around and see how many other people do the same and how quickly they grab their phones. We can't be on our own.
It's instant. I actually caught myself the other day on having a drink with someone, and they'd gone to the loo, and almost my instinct was to go to the phone, and I was like, why am I going to go on the phone? It's like 11 o'clock at night. I'm having a drink. I'm going to just see what it's like to sit for 3 minutes without the distraction. And it was quite nice. Yeah. It was quite nice, but it was unusual. But it was also familiar, because I used to always do this, right? I used to go to bars by myself when I was traveling, go out for dinner by myself all the time when I was traveling. And I was used to doing that. Occasionally you'd have a book there, but you wouldn't necessarily be pulling out the book all the time. And you would just sit and be And now I'm not in that state where my default is to be distracted. So
I think
it
there's a
would be an
challenge.
interesting
There's a
experiment for
challenge
people
here,
to
which I think is
yeah,
worth
to do
bearing in
that.
mind, because, and I'll take this on as well, because 99.9% of the time we reach for our phones for those 3 minutes. We use your time frame you mentioned a minute ago. It's very rare those 3 minutes we have on the phone makes us feel any better about ourselves or anything in the world whatsoever. But actually, I would challenge to say, if we were able to not do that for 3 minutes and do that with awareness, we're physically saying, mentally saying, I'm not going to take that action. I'm going to make the decision with awareness not to do it. And you achieve that 3 minutes of solitude and reflection and observation and whatever it is you're doing. I reckon you'd actually feel really good about yourself, because you'd feel like you've achieved something. You'd feel like you've gone against the norm. You'd feel like, actually, I feel really proud of myself. And it's only 3 minutes, but actually that 3 minutes can seem like a really long time if we're constantly used to that distraction. And maybe that's, much rather feel good about ourselves for 3 minutes than be distracted and be, no different, or if anything, potentially more stressed because you've seen something that you've got to deal with now that's going to take you away from whoever the person is that you're spending that time with. You're now going to be distracted.
Yeah, be present in the space with other people and yourself. I think it's common themes we talk about all the time. One thing, I know we're coming up on time, but maybe it'd be good to let our listeners know, or let people know, what would be, I guess, the takeaways for them, because we've talked about a lot of stuff. And I think one thing I would suggest to listeners is have a deliberate morning routine. It's going to be different for everybody, but when you understand that actually the things that you do will dictate your mood, and you're in control of those things to a large part for most people at the beginning of the day, more so than you are towards the middle of the day. Find something as a routine. It could be 1, 2, 3 things that you do that is going to set you up for success. And that might be, reading an inspiring passage, right? It might be reading your goals. It might be doing the gratitude list. It might be drinking a pint of water, moving your body for 5 minutes, getting some morning sunshine. Something that's going to set you up, which doesn't, I would suggest, involve interacting with the outside world. So whether that be TV, YouTube, Facebook, anything like that. Find a morning routine that is going to get you to the state that you want to be in. Right? So I would always put inspiring audio programs from people like Zig Ziglar or Bob Proctor or Tony Robbins or Wayne Dyer. And then I'd get into work and I'd feel great. Whereas other people would be coming in, listening to the news and reading the Metro, and they'd be like, oh, isn't it lousy that so-and-so said this about so-and-so? I'm like, I don't know who so-and-so is. I was thinking about this the other day. I was listening to Ed Sheeran, and this has got nothing, basically, I was trying to find out when he became famous, which was around 2011. And I remember I only came across him probably, and he was a huge star, probably in about 2018. And I was thinking, how did I go 7 years without and a few years without knowing Adele, a few years, all these are huge stars. And I remember it's because from 2010 to 2015, I don't think I listened to any music, anything other than audio programs and training. I don't do that now. I do podcasts, I do music, I do I do all, but for 4 or 5 years straight, and I listened to each audio program probably about 10 or 20 times. I would just listen to that. And so that's why it took me till 2017 to even know this person, Ed Sheeran. Taylor Swift is another one. All these huge stars that I had no idea about.
I don't even know who the Kardashians are, and my wife watches all that stuff. And they could walk past me in the street, and I would not have a clue who any of them. I don't even know. I know one of them is called Kim, as about the end of my knowledge. So look, we pick and choose the things that we find valuable and useful. Right?
Exactly. There's too much. There's too much in the world to know everything and know everything about everyone. I don't know any footballers. You, I'm sure, know more footballers than I do. I used to think that there was a time that how could you not know who footballers were?
Well, I was like, going into
now
the Euros,
I'm in that time.
Come on.
I didn't realise it was the Euros or the Olympics. I didn't even realise it was the Euros or the Olympics.
Well, listen, the Euros will be over by the time this probably airs. But I think that they're conscious of time as well. So just to finish off, I think our level of awareness in any given situation, I think, will dictate our human experience. And I to go back over that is you're always one thought away from happiness and one thought away from sadness. And if you're in that moment of feeling down, as that runner was that wrote into us, try and change your perspective, try and change your level of awareness. And if that means moving, if that means rebounding, if that means changing your morning routine, if that means meditating, whatever it is, try and change your level of awareness in one way. Try and appreciate something that you haven't appreciated for some time. If that means going back to things that made you happy as a child and you have to reminisce, if that means looking at a sunset, if that means sharing your love with a dog, a cat, a family member, whatever, do something that changes your level. Think of yourself in that glass elevator. Go a little bit higher up. It'll change your perspective. When you change your perspective, you might just change how you feel about something. And try and be aware that we all have a negative bias. We all have that bad wolf inside us. We've talked about those parables in the past, the good wolf and the bad wolf, and think, well, okay, I accept that, but what's the good here? What are the things I haven't considered? Because you said there are miracles all around us. We just don't look for them hard enough, and we don't spot them. And I think if we do, it can just change. Change of perspective can change everything. An insight can change everything.
Absolutely right. Speaking of sunsets, I think I'm going to do a bit of DIY, and hopefully the sun is setting in about an hour. So if I can get the two bits of DIY done, I'm going to head out to the beach because I've not really been out there, and get a bit of sunset action in.
Man.
I think
tonight.
Like
achieve something. Good stuff. I'm going to go make a mango Thai salad. There you go. This is actually inspired by my run this morning.
I had Thai tonight as well. I had the Thai red curry. So there we go, Thai all round.
I've given my secrets away. I'm getting my wife for her birthday, which I'm hoping this airs after that time. I've just ruined it. Anyway, real pleasure, Harry, as always. Thanks, listeners, for tuning in. And review us if you get a minute. Share the show if you can, and we'll bring you the next episode real soon.